You have been lied to your entire life, not by a stranger, not by an enemy, by the very people who smiled at you the most. They called it kindness, they called it sensitivity, they called it your gift. But what they actually did was train you to disappear. Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you doesn't just change how you see yourself, it changes how the entire world sees you. Here's the question no one ever asked you: what if the most powerful version of you was the one who finally stopped caring what they thought? Let's start at the beginning. Not your beginning, but the beginning. The moment this all started, you were small, maybe 3 years old, maybe five, and you did something that felt natural. You expressed yourself. You were loud, or you were angry, or you needed something, or you disagreed. And someone in your world, someone big, someone whose approval meant survival, went cold, or got angry, or withdrew. And in that moment, your nervous system did what it was designed to do. It calculated, it assessed threat, and it arrived at a conclusion that would quietly run your life for the next 2, 3, maybe 4 decades. Being myself is dangerous. Making others uncomfortable costs me love. That was the birth of your people pleasing, not weakness, not stupidity, not some character flaw. It was intelligence, a survival adaptation built by a child who was doing exactly what children do, learning the rules of the world they lived in. The problem is, you never got the memo that you had grown up, that the rules had changed, that the people who once held power over your survival were gone or no longer held. That power, and that you were still playing by a rule book that no longer applied. So you kept pleasing, you kept softening your edges, you kept swallowing your words, you kept making yourself smaller in rooms where you deserved to take up more space. You said yes when you meant no. You smiled when you were screaming inside. You held the emotions of everyone around you while quietly drowning in your own. And here is what nobody tells empaths: you did not develop empathy because you are spiritually advanced. You developed it because you had to, because reading the emotional weather of the people around you was a survival skill. Because knowing when someone was about to explode, knowing how to soften the mood, knowing how to be exactly what someone needed, that was your shield. Your sensitivity is not a gift that was given to you, it is a tool you forged in pain. And it is extraordinary. It is genuinely extraordinary. The ability to feel what others feel, to read a room in seconds, to know exactly what someone needs before they say it. There is a reason the world's greatest leaders, artists, negotiators, healers, and communicators tend to be deeply empathic people. But here is the tragedy: most empaths never use that power for themselves. They spend their entire lives deploying it in service of everyone else's comfort. So they become emotional caretakers for people who never asked to be healed and never offered healing in return. And slowly, silently, imperceptibly, they disappear. Let's go deeper, because this is where it gets uncomfortable. There is a psychological mechanism at work in people pleasing that most people have never examined. It is called intermittent reinforcement, and it is the same mechanism that makes gambling addictive, that makes toxic relationships feel impossible to leave, and that makes approval, once you've been conditioned to need it, feel like the most powerful drug on the planet. Here's how it works: when you were young and you pleased someone, when you quieted yourself down, when you made them laugh, when you solved their problem, when you absorbed their anger without retaliating, you got a reward. Sometimes it was a smile, sometimes it was warmth, sometimes it was simply the absence of punishment, but it was a reward, and your brain logged it. Then the next time the reward didn't come, you did the same thing. You pleased, you shrunk, you performed, and nothing happened. Or they were still cold, or they took it for granted. And your brain, rather than concluding that the behavior didn't work, doubled down, because that's what intermittent reinforcement does. Unpredictable rewards create more compulsive behavior, not less. The slot machine doesn't pay out every time. That's precisely why you can't stop pulling the lever. You have been pulling the lever your entire life. And the cruelest part, The people who benefit most from your people pleasing, the takers, the manipulators, the emotionally immature, they instinctively understand this dynamic, even if they couldn't articulate it. They know on some level that if they give you approval sometimes and withhold it other times, you will work harder for them. You will give more. You will tolerate more. You will bend further. Your empathy deployed in service of people pleasing made you the perfect target for people who had learned how to exploit kindness. This is not your fault, but it is now your responsibility. Because once you can see the mechanism, once you can name it, map it, and trace it back to its origin, it loses power over you. Not immediately, not completely, but the spell begins to break. And when the spell breaks, something terrifying and magnificent happens simultaneously. You start to feel the weight of everything you've been carrying that was never yours to carry. If this is landing somewhere deep in your chest, share it with one person who needs to hear it. Follow for the psychology that most people are never taught. Comment the word untouchable if you're ready to stop shrinking, because the next part is where everything changes. Here is something that surprises most people when they first hear it: the awakening, the moment when an empath finally starts to reclaim themselves, does not feel like liberation at first. It feels like grief, because when you begin to stop pleasing everyone, when you start saying no, when you start holding boundaries, when you start putting your own needs in the equation, people react. And their reactions tell you everything you need to know about why you were pleasing them in the first place. Some people get angry. They were used to you being endlessly available, endlessly accommodating, and your sudden refusal to play that role reads to them as a betrayal. As if you are the one who changed the contract, as if there even was a contract, as if your servitude was something you owed them. Some people get confused. They don't know who you are when you're not performing for them. The version of you that always said yes, always showed up, always fixed things, that version was the only one they knew. When you stop being that, they don't know how to relate to you. And rather than adjusting, they often disappear. Some people get manipulative. They remind you of everything they've done for you. They invoke guilt. They describe you as selfish, cold, changed for the worse. They weaponize the very empathy you're trying to reclaim, banking on the fact that your sensitivity to their pain will pull you back into the pattern. And here's the grief: you will lose people. Not all people, but some. And often, some of those people will have been in your life for a long time. Some of them will be people you love. Some of them will be family. And that loss is real. It should be honored. You are allowed to grieve the relationships that were built on a version of you that was performing rather than existing. But here is what you must understand: you did not lose those relationships when you stopped people pleasing. You lost them the moment you started. The friendship that required your self erasure was never a real friendship. The love that required your silence was never real love. The family bond that demanded your compliance was not safety, it was control dressed up in the language of loyalty. What you are grieving is not the relationship itself. You are grieving the fantasy of what you hoped that relationship could be, the imagined version where they saw you fully, where they loved you unconditionally, where the dynamic was reciprocal and nourishing. That fantasy was never the reality. And releasing it, truly releasing it, not as an act of anger, but as an act of clarity, is one of the most psychologically advanced things a human being can do. Now, let's talk about what happens in the brain when an empath finally stops the cycle. When you've spent years in people pleasing mode, your nervous system is running on a baseline of hypervigilance. Your amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, is chronically activated, constantly scanning for social danger. A shift in someone's tone of voice, a slight pause before they respond to your message, a look across the room that might mean disapproval. Your brain has been trained to treat these signals as emergencies. This is called social threat sensitivity, and in empaths who've been conditioned by early environments of emotional unpredictability, it is running on overdrive. Your cortisol levels are higher, your baseline anxiety is elevated, You are, neurologically speaking, living in a state of low level chronic stress even when nothing is overtly wrong. But here is what happens when you begin to disengage from people pleasing. First, there is a spike. The anxiety gets worse before it gets better because you are breaking a pattern that your nervous system has associated with safety. When you say no for the first time, when you let someone be disappointed, when you don't rush to smooth over a conflict, your amygdala fires. It screams. It tells you that you are in danger, that you've made a terrible mistake, that you need to go back and fix it. This is not a sign that you're doing something wrong. This is a sign that you're doing something new. Because gradually, and the research is unambiguous, about this, as you practice new behavior, as you prove to your nervous system that the world does not end when you disappoint someone, as you demonstrate repeatedly that your survival is not contingent on universal approval, your baseline threat response begins to lower. Your prefrontal cortex, the seat of conscious decision making, long term thinking, and emotional regulation begins to come back online because it was never broken. It was just perpetually overridden by a fear system that was doing its job based on outdated information. And as that shift happens, something remarkable emerges: clarity, stillness, presence, not the false calm of someone who has numbed out, not the disconnection of someone who has built walls, but the genuine grounded stillness of someone who no longer needs the room to arrange itself for them. Someone who walks in, takes up space, and is simply completely there. This is what I mean by untouchable. Not cold, not distant, not hardened, rooted. The person who is untouchable is not someone who doesn't feel. They feel everything more even than they did before, but they are no longer at the mercy of what they feel. They are no longer managed by other people's emotions. They no longer give away their power at the door. Let's get specific, because transformation without a map is just suffering with a better story. Shift one: from reaction to response. The people pleasing empath is a reactor. Someone frowns, they feel responsible. Someone is unhappy, they move to fix it. Someone is angry, they absorb it. They are emotionally porous, and everyone who enters their life walks through them like weather through an open window. The untouchable empath learns to create a gap between stimulus and response, between what happens to them and what they do with it. This is not a skill you are born with. It is a practice. It is the daily, unglamorous work of noticing the impulse to please, noticing the anxiety that accompanies it, and consciously, deliberately to pause before acting on it. That pause is where your power lives. Shift two: from empathy as merger to empathy as witness. Most empaths have confused empathy with merger. They don't just feel with someone, they become them. They lose the boundary between where they end and where the other person begins. When someone they love is in pain, they are in pain. When someone is anxious, they become anxious. When someone is angry, they feel guilty. Untouchable empaths learn a different kind of empathy: witnessing, the ability to see someone's pain, to understand it, to honor it without absorbing it, to stand beside someone's suffering rather than inside it. This is not callousness. It is, in fact, more useful than merger, because you cannot help someone if you've become them. You can only help them if you remain yourself. Shift three: from approval seeking to self validation. The dependency on external approval is essentially an outsourced self concept. People pleasing empath has given others the key to their internal world. They are only okay when someone tells them they are. They only know they are enough when someone confirms it. The shift to self validation is not about becoming arrogant or indifferent to feedback. It is about developing the internal infrastructure to assess your own worth without requiring it to be reflected back to you in every interaction. It is about building a relationship with yourself that is stable enough to survive disapproval. Shift four: from boundaries as walls to boundaries as values. Empaths often resist the concept of boundaries because they've been taught explicitly or implicitly that boundaries are selfish. That saying no is a form of abandonment. That needing space is a form of rejection. But this is a profound misunderstanding of what boundaries actually are. Boundaries are not walls. Walls keep people out. Boundaries define who you are. They are the map of your values, your energy, your time, your emotional capacity. When you communicate a boundary, you are not saying, I don't care about you. You are saying, I care about myself enough to be honest with you about what I can and cannot offer. And paradoxically, profoundly, counterintuitively, paradoxically, the empath who holds clear boundaries becomes more sought after, not less, because they are finally bringing a real self to the table, not a performance. And real selves are magnetic. Shift five, from helping to avoid guilt to helping from genuine desire. This is the most subtle and the most transformative shift of all. The people pleasing empath helps people. Yes, they give, they support, they show up. But if you look honestly at the interior experience of that helping, you will often find something uncomfortable underneath, the relief of not feeling guilty, the anxiety avoidance, the fear of what would happen if they didn't help. They are not helping from abundance, they are helping from fear, the untouchable. Empath learns to distinguish between those two states. They learn to ask honestly why they are saying yes to something, not as a way of withholding generosity, but as a way of making their generosity genuine. Because help given from genuine desire is energizing, it builds the relationship. It is experienced by the recipient as care. Help given from guilt or obligation is depleting. It breeds resentment, and the recipient often unconsciously can feel the difference. They can feel when they are receiving someone's authentic presence versus someone's performed benevolence. When you start helping only from genuine desire, when every yes you give is a real yes, you become someone whose presence actually means something. Now, I want to tell you something that sounds like a contradiction, but isn't. The empath who stops people pleasing doesn't become less loved, they become more. This is the great paradox, and it is one that psychology backs up thoroughly. When you are endlessly available to everyone, you become invisible to most. You are taken for granted. You are the background of other people's stories, the support structure that everyone relies on and nobody thinks about. You are furniture in their emotional home. But when you develop edges, when you have preferences, when you say no, when you are difficult in the specific way that people with self respect are difficult, you become someone that people have to reckon with. You become someone worth paying attention to. This is not manipulation. This is not game playing. It is simply the natural consequence of becoming a person with a clearly defined self. Think about the people in your life who you respect the most, who you find most compelling, who you would most want to know. I would wager that they are not the ones who agreed with everything you said, who never challenged you, who shaped themselves seamlessly to your expectations. They are the ones who were genuinely themselves in your presence. The ones whose approval, when it came, meant something because it wasn't guaranteed. The ones who said what they thought, even when it was inconvenient. The ones who held the room, not by performing for it, but by inhabiting themselves so fully that the room had no choice but to adjust. That is the gravity that untouchable empaths develop. Not the gravity of dominance, not the gravity of aggression, but the quiet, magnetic, undeniable gravity of someone who is fully, unapologetically, and peacefully themselves. Let me prepare you for something because this part is important and often omitted. When you change, when you genuinely, fundamentally change, the world around you will resist. This is not because the world is evil. It is because systems seek equilibrium. Every social system, you are part of your family, your friend group, your workplace, your relationship has organized itself around a particular version of you. The version that was predictable, accommodating, safe, the version that never disrupted the equilibrium. When you stop being that version, the system experiences disruption, and systems restore equilibrium in one of two ways. They either adapt to the new version of you or they push back hard enough that the old version returns. Most systems will initially try the second approach. They will increase pressure. They will use the tools that have historically worked on you: guilt, disappointment, withdrawal of approval, accusations of selfishness, reminders of obligation. And this is the crucible because this is the moment where the transformation either holds or collapses. And I want to be honest with you, for a long time before the new neural pathways are fully established, before the new patterns of behavior have been rehearsed enough to become automatic, this pressure will feel enormous. It will feel like you are the one doing something wrong. It will feel like your boundaries are causing harm. It will feel like the most loving thing you could do would be to go back to the way things were. This feeling is a liar. The loving thing, the truly deeply loving thing that you can do for the people in your life is to remain changed. Because when you collapse back into people pleasing under pressure, you don't just betray yourself. You send a message to everyone around you that they don't need to grow, that you will absorb the consequences of their emotional immaturity, that the system can keep running on your self erasure indefinitely. When you hold the change, you create the possibility for them and for you of something real. Some people in your life will rise to meet that possibility. They will feel initially disrupted. And then when they realize you are not abandoning them, but simply showing up as yourself, they will feel something they may never have felt with you before: genuine respect. Not the comfortable fondness that comes from reliable accommodation, but the deep, solid eye to eye respect that comes from encountering someone with self possession, someone who is there, fully there, not as a mirror of your needs, but as an actual person. That is the relationship worth waiting for. That is the version of love that is actually nourishing. Let's talk about who you become. The untouchable empath is not an island. They are not cold. They are not someone who has traded their heart for armor. That is not the transformation, that is just a different form of protection. The untouchable empath is someone who has learned to lead with their real self instead of their adapted self, who has developed the courage, and it is courage, genuine moral courage, to be seen without the performance, who has practiced repeatedly and imperfectly the art of staying in their own lane emotionally while still being fully present to the people they love. In professional settings, they are the person who can say the difficult truth in the room that everyone is avoiding, not because they enjoy conflict, but because they are no longer afraid of it. And that courage to speak creates clarity, and clarity creates trust, and trust creates influence. In personal relationships, they are the person whose love means something because it is chosen freely, not given compulsively, because they are not with you because they need your approval. They are with you because they genuinely want to be. In their relationship with themselves, they have developed something that no amount of external validation can replace: the settled, quiet, unshakable knowledge that they are enough, not because someone told them so, not because they performed well enough, but because they have done the hard work of meeting themselves honestly. They are able to achieve great things. And they have decided, despite all the evidence that their early life tried to offer to the contrary, that they are worthy of their own regard. That is the final destination. That is what becomes untouchable. Not a fortress, not an attitude, not a strategy, a self, a real, complete, boundaried, loving, powerful, feeling, choosing, magnificent self. So here is where we end, and here is where you decide. You have been carrying a version of yourself that was designed to keep you safe in a world you no longer live in. You have been measuring your worth in other people's comfort. You have been shrinking in rooms that deserve your full presence. You have been giving yourself away piece by piece, year by year, to people and systems that were never going to give you back what you needed, because they were never going to give you back yourself. And none of it was your fault. But it is now your responsibility, not because you owe it to the world, not because you owe it to some abstract idea of self improvement, but because somewhere inside you, underneath the conditioning, underneath the fear, underneath the performance, there is a version of you that is extraordinary, that is genuinely extraordinary, that feels deeply, thinks sharply, loves fiercely, and perceives the world with a richness and nuance that most people can only glimpse. That version of you deserves to exist fully in every room, in every relationship, in every conversation, in every moment you have left on this planet. The world does not need another person who has traded their soul for approval. The world needs you, the real you, the unedited, unperforming, unapologetic, boundary holding, fiercely empathic, no longer shrinking you. And here is the extraordinary truth that I will leave you with. The moment you stop trying to be everything to everyone, the moment you decide that your full, authentic, uncompromising self is worth more than any approval you can earn by erasing it, that is the moment you become, in the truest and most profound sense of the word, untouchable. Not because no one can reach you, but because the only people who can reach you now are the ones who are real. Go be that.